Hi y'all, this is Larry from Deep South Texas, and today we're going to make honey wheat bread. It should be fun. My last bread video was a very simple to make white bread, loaf of white bread, and it really turned out terrific. But the younger generation, they prefer to eat probably a little healthier and would like to see a wheat bread video. So that's what we're going to do here. However, wheat bread is a little tricky. It turns out very dense and not like that wheat bread that you buy at the store. So we're going to try to go a little bit light on the whole wheat. We'll still use quite a bit of white bread flour, but we're going to make a loaf that's a little bit healthier, easy to make, and more in line with the wheat bread that you buy at the grocery store. Let's get started. And here are the ingredients. 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour, 6 cups of white bread flour. I'm using King Arthur. 2 cups of warm milk. 1 cup of warm water, 1/4 cup of honey, 4 teaspoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of canola oil, and 2 tablespoons of instant yeast. Now, if you're using dry active yeast instead of instant yeast, it's going to work exactly the same in this recipe. So we have our mixing bowl here. To the mixing bowl, we're going to add 1 cup of warm water, 2 cups of warm milk, 1/4 cup of honey, and our 2 tablespoons of yeast. Now, this is instant yeast. If you're using dry active yeast, do it the same way. Just let it set in the mixing bowl before you add anything else until you start seeing it foam up. But we'll get that yeast dissolved in there, and then we'll start adding the flour. So in goes our 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour. Get that mixed in. And then we'll add our bread flour, a little bit at a time. This is 6 cups. I probably will add 5.5 and then see how it mixes up and maybe add a little bit more later. There, I have that much left. And we'll get this all mixed up. This will take a little bit, so let me finish this and get back to you. Oh, and I forgot. I want to add the salt now. Don't forget to add the salt. And the oil. Okay, be back when I get this mixed. So we all have that all mixed together pretty well. I maybe have a tablespoon of flour left in the bowl here. So now we're just going to cover that and let it set for 20 minutes so the flour can fully absorb all the moisture. Well, we've let the dough rest for 20 minutes, and now we want to knead the bread. Let's turn it out onto this board here. That came out pretty good. And now we're just going to knead it. To knead for, oh, I don't know, about 8 minutes. We're not trying to avoid adding any more flour to the board to keep it from sticking. Occasionally we'll just scrape it up a little bit, keep the board clean. So it feels pretty good already, but it's going to feel better after about 8 minutes of kneading. But I won't make you watch 8 minutes. Let me finish kneading this bread and then we'll take a look. Well, I've been kneading for about 10 minutes and the dough feels pretty good. I think it's done. So it's not quite so sticky. It feels smooth. The dough will kind of tell you when it's ready. So now we're going to form this up into a ball. Going to dust the top of it with a little flour and put it back in our mixing bowl to rise. And we'll let that rise for 1 hour. See you then. Well, it's been an hour. And our dough has definitely risen. Let's sprinkle a little bit more flour on top and run around the edge of the bowl. Make sure it's nothing sticking. And then let's dump this out onto the board. There. That came out pretty good. Now we need to punch this down a little bit. We're actually making 2 loaves of bread. So once we get this down and get all the big bubbles pushed out, we're going to cut this in half. So try to get it as even as possible. A little sticky here. Throw a little bit more flour under here. Okay, punch it down a little bit more. And start shaping a little bit here. What we're going to do is just fold all these corners over. Keep folding them over until we have a nice ball shape. We're actually going to cook these in, bake these in loaf pans, but we're doing this pre-shaping first. And then we'll set that off to the side. We're going to do the same thing with the other half. We'll get back to you when I've got that done. So I have the two halves shaped up now for a pre-shape. Now we're just going to cover that and let that rest for 5 minutes, and then we'll be back. So I know in the last clip I said to let them rest for 5 minutes, but what I meant was 15 minutes. And these have rested for 15 minutes. So now we're going to give them the final shaping. Just flip them over. Punch it down. And stretch it out a little bit. And fold it over. Punch it down a little bit more. We're going to put them in loaf pans. And so we want them to be about this size on the bottom here, on the top a little bit narrower. And now we're going to roll it up. Sure to tuck it in tightly each time you make a turn here. And seal this bottom real good. And then we'll put that into the loaf pan. And that will go in there for 45 minutes to an hour. In about a half an hour, I will start preheating the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So we have our 2 loaves shaped and put into bread pans. And I think these pans are like 9.5 inches by 5.5 inches by 3 inches deep. So we'll just cover these with a towel and we'll let these set 45 minutes to an hour, whenever they have risen high enough for our satisfaction. And then we'll put them in the oven at 375 degrees for about 40 minutes, maybe 45. Well, these loaves have been rising for an hour. Let's see how they're doing. Wow, they look pretty good. Time to get these into the oven. Now the oven has been preheated, so I'm just going to put them in now. So the bread is in the oven. We'll leave it there for 40-45 minutes. At about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, I'll check it to see if the tops are getting too brown. If they are, I'll put a piece of tinfoil over top of them. So we'll see you again when they're out of the oven. Well, it's been 45 minutes and I just took this bread out of the oven. Let's get it out onto the cooling rack. Looks pretty good. Now we're going to brush the top with a little bit of butter just to try to keep it soft. It looks good. Good rise. I think this is going to be some pretty nice bread. So let's take a closer look. And here they are. They look pretty nice. They sound like they're done. Now we just have to let them cool off. And I'll be standing guard over them for the next hour while they're cooling off to keep the family away. We'll check back when they're ready to cut. Well, the bread has cooled down. It's time to slice into it and see how it turned out. All right, we've got a few slices cut and it looks real good. Real good. Let's put a little butter on this and give it a taste. Just wonderful, just wonderful. It's nice and light and flavorful as well. It's pretty close to the honey wheat bread that you might have been used to purchasing at the grocery store. Now, this is only 20% whole wheat and 80% bread flour. If you don't have bread flour on hand, you can try all-purpose flour instead. I'd stay away from self-rising flour. But it turned out well. Couldn't be happier with it. A little more nutritious than straight white bread. Now, if you try this recipe and your family really likes it, which I'm sure that they will, then the next time you make it, you could go to like 30% whole wheat flour, and then move on to 40% whole wheat flour. The bread will get a little bit denser each time you increase the percentage of whole wheat flour, but it will get more nutritious as well. So find that mix that your family really likes, and then stick with that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.